Welcome to Curate Your Career, a museum career podcast about staying, leaving, and everything in between. I'm Elin Philby, museum educator turned career coach.
And I'm Allie Schell, career coach specifically for museum professionals. And we're here to talk about all the messy, exciting, and sometimes confusing parts of working in museums.
Each week, we'll share stories, real advice, and quick wins to help you figure out your next move, whether that's staying, leaving, or just making your current job work better for you.
So let's dive in, because if there's one thing museum professionals are great at, it's overthinking. We're here to help you think smarter, not spiral. Take a breath and let's get started. All right, I want to start this episode off with a question. Elin, tell me about an early volunteer experience or a volunteer experience that was beneficial to you.
Yeah. So when I was in grad school at GW, volunteered for, I'm pretty sure it's called Morning at the Museum. And it was a collective across the different Smithsonians that had sensory friendly early morning hours for kids and their families. And they were, for kids on the autism spectrum or that had different sensory needs. So I volunteered with that group to establish the programming and to run the events. And it was really cool, especially as a grad student, that I got to meet all of these professionals and see how they operate and learn from them in a very hands-on sort of way, and then also make those connections. So yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. What about you?
I was just sitting here thinking, I'm like, I have two directions I can go because I actually got into this field as a youth volunteer at like 15, which is always my story. But I think the ones I want to mention are my later in life volunteer roles, which are on professional boards and committees, because I think that's an area that people forget about that is absolutely essential, but not essential, but can be essential to skill building and building things like leadership, um, in other areas that you want to expand on. So I have done that through the Small Museum Association and a variety of roles, from leading the conference to being on the board, to even little smaller organizations, still nonprofits, just within my local community. And all have given me lots of great skills and opportunities and networks. So if you haven't gotten the gist, this is the theme for today's podcast episode, which is all around volunteerism as professional development. Because everyone asks me, and I'm sure, Elin, you get asked questions too, how can I skill build? How can I advance in this field or advance to leave the field? And sometimes people just put out there, we'll just volunteer. And we really want to break that down, what that actually means, how you can do that in a way that is meaningful and a way that actually helps your career, but also can help the organization too. There's kind of a two-part here that our guest, who is so patiently waiting in the background, to get into. And a lot of times that's because volunteerism can get framed in a bunch of different ways. It can get framed as not real professional experience, which I will always fight tooth and nail for, especially on resumes. Times places just see it as filler, and or something that is just a desperate job move that you just need to have something on there for the sake of having it on there. We're really going to reframe this as intentional professional development and something that can really be beneficial to your career and career moves. So we have joining us today the wonderful Angela Williamson, another Delawarean in the house. So sorry, you have two of us. And I would love to have Angela, you introduce yourself and share first what you do, and then your career origin story, how you got to where you are now.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be joining both of you and all of you together watching this. And so, excuse me, Angela Williamson, CVA. CVA stands for Certified Volunteer Administrator. It is the certification internationally for this profession of volunteer leadership. And what I do today, I am full-time at the Blood Bank of Delmarva as the Volunteer Community Relations Specialist. And I'm really, really excited that I am now also consulting with my Volunteer Engagement Accelerator. Ta-da! I work with nonprofits or even individuals that are working with nonprofits to help with that volunteer engagement so that it's the best volunteer engagement for the nonprofits. So many things have changed in the world. So engaging with volunteers has changed so much, both directions as a volunteer and as a volunteer leader and for the organizations. And so there's just so many shifts and changes going on pretty constantly, it feels like right now. So I just love and I'm so excited to be helping nonprofits be able to utilize that shift and that change, but help to match volunteers who are like, I want to volunteer, and nonprofits who are like, I can't find any volunteers. And there's obviously a mismatch happening because there's people that say they want to volunteer and nonprofits aren't finding them, or vice versa. So there's definitely work to be done there. And I'm excited to be helping with that. An origin. So thinking about what you talked about this at the beginning was volunteers. I remember volunteering as a kid with my family. And I grew up in Nebraska, not far from where we held the state fair was held. And it was a big deal. And so we went as a family. I think we did it a couple years, but the one year I remember especially, we picked up trash. So we got this like vest we put on and the snapper things to pick up stuff, and picked up trash at the state fair. And so when we got done, we ended up getting tickets to the concert that I was so excited to attend. I mean, we were up in the nosebleed. It was probably the last seat of the house, but whatever. We were in this concert and it was just so exciting as a kid to be like, I picked up trash and I got to go to a concert. Like, how cool is that? So that was kind of my first foray into that, but very heavily involved with 4-H and church and clubs. And, most recently the Delaware City Tree Commission where I live. And so there's just, so many different ways that you can be involved as a volunteer. So I look forward to talking more about how to do that.
As you mentioned in here, I think first, like very early learning volunteer perks, that is a real thing. And where volunteerism is often tied to our communities and the types that have to be in, potentially for this, the theme of this conversation doesn't always have to be in museums. But Angela and I first met when Angela was in a museum leading volunteers. And I was in a small museum as a volunteer leader, but also among the many other things. So I would love to learn a little bit more, still going off your origin story of how you got into like museums and volunteer work in museums, and then now the transition, how you transitioned out or why you wanted to transition out, because I think that'll cover both sides of Elin and I's coaching pathways and what we help people with.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually started, it kind of goes back to grad school. I was at grad school, University of Delaware, Longwood Gardens, had a graduate program for public horticulture administration. And part of that program was getting a certificate in museum studies. And so I had that certificate in museum studies. And so that nonprofit was just baked into and part of that graduate program. And so when I graduated, couldn't find a job right away. So I ended up moving back home to Nebraska, living with mom and dad for a while. And I started working at the university there as on the grounds leader. And so I had a small crew of 2 and myself, and we took care of the grounds. So I was literally outside doing everything but mow the grass, bucket trucks, chainsaws, the plants, the mulch, the people, education, like all the things. And I knew I loved that, but it's not where I wanted to stay. And so I needed to get back to the people part of things. So I think the thing too to remember as I tell this story is that you have to know what you like and what you don't like. And sometimes I didn't figure it out until I tried it. And so sometimes you have to try it first. And then you go, I love it. Or, nope, don't like that. Let's pivot. Let's figure out something else. So I was doing that for about 2-3 years. And I kept in touch with a professor out here, I say in Delaware. And I said, I'm ready to get something different. What do you know out there? And he happened to be like, well, we just happen to have this job at Longwood. So I applied, got it. And it was in the education department. So it was now I'm back at Longwood, back at teaching high school students is what I started with. And I love this. I walked into my office my first day. The only thing that it was in my office was a telephone sitting on the floor. Like, there was an actual telephone with it. Yeah. Anyway, all got that. But that's how I started. And it was just a hoot. And so I'm like, okay, cool. You just never know what's going to happen. Right. But you have to be ready for anything. So built it up. And so I was working in the education department. I worked with high school students, but then it kind of progressed. And I was working with the professional gardening students. And then the last thing I was doing was the adult continuing education program. So I was there for about 9 years, three different major roles. And then I was like, I had gotten married, I had moved, and things were just different in life. And I was just like, I think it's time for a change. And then the last thing I had done in Longwood was working with adults continuing education. They had volunteers in that program to help them. And I thought, that's kind of cool. I like people. I could work with people all day long. And this volunteer thing sounds kind of interesting. A local museum happened to see a job role. And so I applied, got that job. So then I went to Hagley Museum and Library. If you're in Delaware area, you'll know that. So then I became the volunteer coordinator, manager, whatever the right title was. And that's where I really grew and learned this volunteer leadership as actually a profession. And so many of my colleagues and I quote, fall into this job leading volunteers, or it's tacked onto a job. Ali knows that. It's like, oh, and you're going to do volunteers. It's easy, right? No problem. Not a big deal. I was able to focus in on volunteerism, just really learn so much about that and get good contacts in Delaware, went nationally. And so it's just grown and grown and grown since then. So I was at Hagley for about 11 years. And I thought, I think it's about time for a change. And then there was this job opening at the Blood Bank of Delmarva. And what I liked about it is that it was a smaller volunteer engagement and they wanted growth. And I thought, that's what I want. I want to create. I am a creator. So part of your story and understanding yourself, I think you need to figure out, based on anything that you've already done or by process of elimination, is figure out who you are and what you like. So I like variety. I like creating things from nothing or from little, like just getting to the root of problems. And it's taken me time to refine what I am and who I am and what I like to do. And so I think that's part of the process for anybody in their career, whether they're at the beginning, middle, or end, is really figuring out, what is it that I really want to do right now? And so I think that that's part of that journey that I've taken through this. So then about 2.5, 3 years ago, something like that, I started thinking about this consulting idea. I think probably even before that. It was this little seed that got planted a long time ago, and I just wasn't ready for it. I had a lot of imposter syndrome thoughts. I had a lot of, who could I be to do this? How could I ever? Who's going to listen to me? What do I have to offer? So here's the message. All three of us have had them. So if you're in really good company. Ta-da! And so it's not like magic that you don't have these things. But anyway, so then I thought, okay, well, then I just got to a point where it's like, I really need to just figure this out and try to start. So then there's a nonprofit organization of volunteers called SCORE. I actually don't know what it stands for, but it's small business owners, and they help other business owners if they volunteer their time to help you learn how to start a small business. It's SCORE, all capital. And so I met with somebody there, got started, and then I got introduced to a professional coach, business coach, met with him several times. And that's what really has launched me in the right direction. And so toying with things on your own is great to kind of figure out if you really want to do it or not. But I also highly suggest having friends and even outside help, like consultants, like Elon or Ali or myself or whomever, to really be able to come alongside you. And will you get to the end result on your own? Probably. But Ali and I were just talking about how it just, at some point, it just makes financial sense and time sense to hire somebody who knows exactly what they're doing, because they're going to do it right. And they're going to do it for less time. And it's worth that investment to put into that. So that's kind of where I got going. And it's just I've been working hard and building and learning lots about a small business and about, getting myself out there. So that's kind of my journey and where I'm at today. And I really love the volunteer world, and that as a profession, as a volunteer myself, and how it really can tie the community together.
Thank you
So
for sharing all of that.
awesome.
I think that us sharing our stories, like anytime we have a and it helps to normalize things and also share different pathways and what you can do with your skills, which I know Elin is dying to weigh in, because you noted a bunch of things that Elin does with her coaching practice. helps people transition out. So, speak to anything if you wish. So,
Just really hit the nail on the head with you have to understand what you like and what you don't like to move unaware of that, or if you're not clear on that, it could feel stuck really easily and not feel aligned with what you're wanting to do. So yeah, totally.
And sometimes it takes that outside person to start asking the right questions or to help guide or to help you understand yourself and be that mirror conversation to say, are you good with this? Are you good with that? And I was really blessed with some really great colleagues and friends that I started asking, well, what do you see as my secret sauce, my superpower? Because I didn't see it myself. Because to me, it's easy. The things I do, I'm like, oh, it's just easy to be creative. It's easy to come up with like 10 gazillion ideas because they just bubble up out of my head. But then to find out that that's not everybody's normal is like, oh, you mean not everybody does that? So having other people you trust, help reflect back to you what your secret sauce or your secret superpowers are.
I would say like majority of the work that I help people with on their resumes is simply me asking them questions to draw experience that is there. They just don't know. Like same with you, right? You don't know it's a superpower. You know it's different, or it stands out. Just seems like hey, everyone does exhibits, so what is how I go about it any different? And well, these are so many good just overall advice pointers. And I think along with this to kind of transition into the heart of the podcast today is you could use volunteer work as a way to get clearer on what you like and what you don't like at any stage. So I think that's just a
Absolutely.
really good thing to keep in mind if you are someone that's at a crossroads or trying to figure things out. And
Yeah, absolutely. So volunteerism is a great way because you don't have to get paid to learn something, or you don't have to learn something at your current job. If by volunteering, you are going to be gaining other experiences and you can look for something that's similar or completely different than what you're doing right now to explore what that means and what that looks like and see if you like it. What if you don't like it? Do you like a different type of job? Do different or the same kind of job, but in a different setting? Or, there's different ways to look at that. So again, figuring out kind of the end result, having the end in mind before you get started. And sometimes you don't know what the end is going to be, but you have to just start somewhere. And so with that volunteering is finding a place that one will have what you're looking for at the moment to learn or to give or to experience. And then understanding that nonprofit, do your homework on that nonprofit. Do they have roles open? What do they require? Do you have to be there for 20 hours, 100 hours? What's their minimum? What's their application process look like? And honestly, be honest with yourself because I have volunteers that will apply to be a volunteer and then I never hear from them again. And I think, well, I can't imagine that just the application turned them off, because they finished it, but something in their life. But I've had other volunteers be like, I realized I don't have time. And so I think being very realistic about your time as well. If you only have, like, the only time you have to volunteer is Saturday from 8 to 10 a.m., be sure you note that and be sure you tell the organizations and look for organizations that have those open times because it's a waste for you and it's a waste for the organization. If you apply somewhere and you find out that they don't have Saturday from 8 to 10, but that's the only time that works for you, it's a waste on both sides. So do your research, do your homework, and be willing to do the application. And as we know in the nonprofit world, there's probably not enough staff doing all the things that they need to be doing. So have patience with the process, with the person, with the staff or volunteer who might be helping you. And then, too, know what you're bringing into it. And you can't expect them to train you like a staff person because if you're a volunteer, you're volunteering your time and you're only going to be there for X amount of hours. And so it's not the nonprofit's responsibility. It's their responsibility to train you for the role you're going to be doing, but it's not the responsibility for them to train you for your next career move, if that makes sense. Kind of a difference there. Um, but look for those opportunities where the career move that you want to go to will include the things that you can learn from the nonprofit. If that makes sense. So
absolutely,
yeah, so I
absolutely.
think there's lots of options. And Ellie, like you said too, boards or committees or commissions, or, there's lots of different roles and ways to be involved to add to leadership skills, to rub shoulders with people that are going to challenge you and maybe help network you into the next role, or, whatever that is. So again, having some idea of maybe a direction you want to go, that can really direct where you want to volunteer. And if you don't know, start somewhere and start eliminating by process, and figuring out what you do or don't want to do.
Yeah, I think too, you really can't undersell that networking aspect of who are you interfacing with? How do those connections get built through your time? Because, yeah, especially if you are using this as a stepping stone or a skill gathering point or experience gathering point, especially if you're doing a good job, you're
Bingo.
gonna be, making connections for your network and building your network in a way that will benefit you.
And that goes to something I was going to mention too, is you want to do a really good job. You want to fulfill, you want to be trustworthy, you want to do all the things and follow their rules, their policies, even if you don't agree. I mean, if you don't agree, then don't go to their organizations, but you have to go with what they have. And to be able to follow through, because these are folks that will be able to give you a recommendation. And if you like what you're doing there, stay with them for a long time, because that gives them that return on investment. They've invested in you. Now you invest in them and make sure that it's worth their time that they've spent training you, getting you acclimated, all the things. So I think that that's something too, is again, on your own, you have to know for yourself, what are you looking for? How much time and when can you actually volunteer or do these things? What are you really looking for? And then to treat it as a great opportunity and to be grateful and to be thankful to them, because again, as nonprofit staff, too many times we don't hear the thank yous from other staff or anybody. So, be that bright shining star, and you'll shine brightly.
Oh my gosh, I love that. So many good things. I'm also having flashbacks to prior role. And I think, to go off your point too, of being clear about what you want with skill building in particular, right? So let's say one of the goals, you're looking at jobs and maybe you want to move into a management role, for example. Look for, it doesn't have to be in a museum if you're a museum person. It could be at an animal shelter, right? Like, you could have, maybe this is your fun outlet where you find a different type of organization that aligns with a lot of like the other expectations that you have, your boundaries, but also I can get that skill somewhere else. Doesn't always have to be in a museum, because there might be a museum that has that level of volunteer experience for you.
And it could
And
go the vice versa. Oh, go
no,
ahead.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead. No,
Go
go
right
ahead.
ahead, Angela.
I was just going to say, it can reverse back. Like if you are in one career or one kind of role, and let's just say you're like, I want to learn more about volunteer leadership, or what, maybe you're like, "Oh, I really like people. So how do I get from, a curator into like being a people person, role, and volunteer to help the volunteer leader at a different organization. So maybe you're switching into a museum from, whatever it is. I mean, think through that too. Like you can volunteer in a different role, still in the museum field, not in the museum field. There's just so many different directions you want to go, and yeah, so it's a really wide open. And if anybody ever wants to have a conversation too, obviously any one of us, the three of us, would be happy to.
Oh, yes. To take it back a second, what are some like common misconceptions people have about volunteering? I think ours, you were mentioning, right? Like, a lot of people think that we have to be potentially a certain generation that, or a certain person at a level that can volunteer every day. And that's not necessarily the case. Obviously, none of us have time, we're working, but just wanted you to speak to some of the common misconceptions and dispel those myths a little bit.
Yeah. Going back to my comment about the mismatch of organizations and volunteers, I think it goes both directions. I think volunteers sometimes expect too much too quick, too like instant, because we are in an instant world. And I get it, but that's where I think we've done a disservice, where volunteers think, oh, I can just sign up today for today. And it's like, well, if you think about the not for profit and how they have to function, that doesn't really work for the non for profit. Typically, they need to know, is it going to be covered? Do we have enough volunteer? All those things need to be planned ahead. And so having that understanding as a volunteer that what the nonprofit needs to function well and efficiently is to have things pre-planned and pre-signed up, and don't cancel the day of, because now there's an opening. It's not just a flippant like, oh, something else came up better on my life. And so now I'm going to cancel my volunteering because it's, quote, just volunteering, which is bad because it's not just volunteering. You have committed your time, you've committed, and there are people and resources and nonprofits and clients and dogs and whatever it is relying on you for signing up for that point. So I think that's really important as a volunteer. I think as a volunteer too, to understand that not-for-profits do have policies, procedures, handbooks, all these things in place to protect the volunteers, to protect the organization, to protect the clients that they serve. It's not like a paid role, but it is kind of in that there are responsibilities of the nonprofit to protect, themselves and everything else. So there are risk management things in play. And so I think that's part of it on the volunteer side of things, is to understand those things and to know that, again, nonprofits are short staffed typically. And so it might take longer than 2 hours to get back to you, that you put your application or your email or your phone call in. Like, it might take them a week. It just might. And so to have patience with them. On the nonprofit side of things, nonprofits, I think, really need to start thinking through like having roles and opportunities that are available to work from home, that are on weekends, that are in the evenings, that will fit somebody's schedule that works full time or has shift work or does something else. They're parents and they have kids. And so how does that play into everything? Like, there's so many different, and even if you think of grandparents are taking care of grandkids and they're running after their school things and dropping them off and picking them up and going to their games. And so now we have this whole totally different like way of interacting with life and each other and scheduling and everything else. And so nonprofits really have to start breaking out of that, quote, traditional thought of, well, we're just going to put it out there and all these great volunteers are just going to show up Monday through Friday from, 9 to 5 every day. And it's going to be perfect. And I'm going to open up my closet door and they're all just going to be magically there, fully trained and fully competent and totally the right people doing all the right things. And so I think it's like, somebody who does the volunteer leadership role, I think when they do it really well, people just think it's magic. They just don't even think about it because it just happens. And then when it's not there, I think that's when people start realizing like, oh, what just happened, so I think for the people that do things really well, it can be taken for granted, all those things. So, so the nonprofits need to think through how to make it more flexible for everybody to volunteer and how to volunteer, what roles they can use, and to even think about like skill sets and how, I am not a great numbers person and I don't like details very well. So again, knowing myself, these are the things. And so what have I done at each role that I've had, like when I worked at the museum and now where I'm at now, I have been able to recruit and find volunteers who love details, who love numbers, and they help me. So it is fabulous. That's the other thing too, is whatever your skill set is, you might be able to help a nonprofit, help the volunteer leader, help whoever, and bring those skill sets in. And nonprofits need to be able to understand and to break pieces of a role into like tiny little bits where a volunteer can help.
Question along those lines of, what are your
Mhm.
thoughts on, in relevance to this skill building conversation? Like, what if I wanted to build a skill and I had a nonprofit in town that I really liked? What are your thoughts on going to them and being like, hey, I do this and I'm hoping to do more of this. Do you have space for me? Or is that a capacity that you have?
Uh,
What are your thoughts on
mhm.
people taking
I
initiative and doing something like that?
It's absolutely worth an ask because sometimes the nonprofits, it's a great question. Sometimes nonprofits don't even know what they need. And so when somebody comes and says, I have this, I did accounting. I had 1 or 2 accounting classes in college and I haven't done it for a while, but I'd like to brush up a little bit. They might be like, oh my gosh, please come. We'll get you done, get you started on some basic things and, start working with the finance person, or maybe there's a role, different things like that. So absolutely initiating that conversation, not demanding, but to say, again, knowing yourself, like, what is your actual skill set? Is it very basic? Is it middle? Is it like you're using it now? and being very honest with a not-for-profit to say, I'm a little rusty, but this is what I have done. Or to say, I'm really good at this. Do you need that? I think
Mhm.
that's a great way to go if it's not already in their website or their information.
Yeah. And how would you suggest somebody going about making that type of request for a skill they're looking to build?
You could email, you could try a phone call, and get a hold of whoever, find out who the volunteer leader is. It may be a full-time person or it might be one of their roles that they do. And so finding out the right person and to ask, who leads your volunteers. Sometimes you'll find that on the website. Sometimes you won't. Maybe it's a phone call asking around to other people and then, looking to see who that is and get in touch with them.
And so would you then suggest saying something like, I'm looking to gain management skills. I would love to work. Like, do you have opportunities where I can grow that skill? Is that how people should frame that ask?
I think honesty is the best way. I would rather have somebody be upfront with me to say, this is what I really am trying to aim for. Maybe what they're thinking isn't going to be like, I want management skills, then maybe working in a nonprofit in the role that they were thinking about may help. But the volunteer person may be like, you know what? If you want to do management and you're willing and you have a little bit of management background, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set you up over time. Maybe you have to get in, get used to things, whatever. But then I'd be willing to put you in as a lead volunteer. Again, and I love having lead volunteers because they're the ones that still they want to have just a little bit more involvement. They want to have a little bit more leadership. They want to have a little bit more and they're willing to do that extra. And so that has been absolutely 100% key for me to be able to do what I do at the blood bank because there's 6 different buildings spread like 3 hours apart from each other all over the place, Delmarva. And so without lead volunteers, I would not be able to do what I do, without lead volunteers. So that would be something that could a volunteer can grow into. If I wouldn't go in saying I want to be a lead volunteer because if it's a good volunteer leader, they want to get to know who you are first and say, okay, start here. When I get to know you, then we're going to move you to the next step.
So being intentional with your ask, but also
Yes,
understanding that it might not happen
correct.
tomorrow.
Right. Maybe not that. And hopefully the not for profit will also be honest to say, you know what, we don't have that. And then to be able to move to the next nonprofit and
Mhm.
try to look that way. The other thing too, like if you're thinking management or moving up a level or skill set like that, maybe it's like looking at your local community. Is there a commission or like I live in Delaware City and we have tree commissions and health commissions and all these other commissions. There's county level things, there's school boards. Like, I don't know, like there's so many different ways to get involved in the community that will still give you a higher level of experience with communication and understanding budgets and a whole different world and a whole different group of people that maybe you haven't been with before. And so that will be, again, something else to explore.
And I want to address something from a tactical perspective here is that you can and should put your volunteer experience on your resume.
Yes.
Especially if it
Yes.
is addressing or building a skill or a capacity that you do not have in your paid roles. Like, say you were applying for an education manager role, but you're currently an educator coordinator position. Put that volunteer where you're a lead volunteer, a volunteer manager at the top so they see you have the volunteer or you have the management
Yes.
experience, right? So
Yeah.
don't because anybody who has volunteered know that it's real work. It's meaningful work. Just because you're not getting paid for it doesn't mean that it needs to take a lower place on your resume or be buried at the bottom.
100%. Yep. Absolutely.
And what I often recommend, like for resumes and stuff too, because I believe 100%, like there is so much value in volunteer work that sometimes it can be even greater. Like the skills you gain are even greater. There is such this mindset that it has to be separate. And it has, and times I'll actually term that this is also based on the nature of the volunteer positions. Sometimes I'll actually just turn it into a leadership title. A lot of times though, I move it right up and I will say, I'll title the section relevant professional experience. And that
Yeah.
gets mixed right
Mhm.
in with it. I mean, you can know for sure
Mhm.
that it's volunteer if you want, but I think there's so many amazing roles that you get such great experience out of,
Mhm.
and it deserves a valuable spot on your resume.
Mhm.
and references. So that's the other, going back to
Love
going
this.
and being the best volunteer you can, you're going to be able to meet people who will be able to give you, if you've done well, glowing references, and they'll be happy to give you a reference done well. And that will speak volumes too, because now it's outside of your regular organization. It's showing that you're doing this voluntarily. And now you're getting this reference from a third party, basically. You're doing it not for payment. So I think that can speak a lot of volume too.
Yeah. Are you seeing that organizations are needing both hands-on hours and also administrative technical hours? Are you seeing a mix in that in the field, or do you feel like it's skewing more one way or the other?
It's an interesting question. I think it depends on the not for profit and how well they are adjusting to today's world and today's volunteers. I think that if a not for profit has not changed their volunteer engagement roles at all in the last 10 years, they're going to be behind because that's going to be all quote traditional, most likely, not always, but most traditional hours, Friday or, 9 to 5 or whatever it is. And so I think that it varies, but the needs for nonprofits are going to be both if they do it well, and if they create roles that help at all levels, then there should be volunteer roles at all different levels, whether it's helping the CEO and the director with something. And if you think about it, board members are volunteers. Somehow in the world of nonprofits, the board members are way up here, but they're not paid. They shouldn't be paid anyway. And so board members are technically volunteers. And how often does a board member actually even know the person that's in charge of volunteers? Hello? What's the disconnect? Why is this disconnected? There to me is a big disconnect in the nonprofit, especially museum, but I think all nonprofit world that anyway, so that's a whole nother topic, but whatever. So boards are volunteers, I'll just say that. And the people that are stuffing envelopes are volunteers. And the people that could be helping the CFO, they could be volunteers. So you have to do staff or volunteer selection properly, carefully, just it's matching the right skill set, the right people, it's putting risk management into place. Like you're not just going to bring anybody right off the street and say, okay, great, help us, dive deep into all of our financials. And we don't know who their background is, what they do, what they've done. You're not going to do that, right? So you're going to have if you have to do a background check, you're going to do any kind of reference check. It just depends on the roles as to how much you need to do to risk management that. But you need to have roles at all levels and all different capacities. I really think that then you have a better chance of attracting a variety and a diversity of volunteers to come help you.
Yeah.
My mind is going. I have so many ideas.
I know.
This is such a helpful conversation, not just for job seekers, but I think for nonprofits and organizations too, to realize how they could expand their volunteer use or who can be a volunteer. And I think I'm always thinking about my museum folks and the volunteer roles that they often see out there are just with, visitor services, guest services. And so it's
Right.
helpful to see that they can ask for and look for other things.
Mhm.
Like to add to that, even board committees, right? That's while there is usually a board chairperson, they will often pull people from outside an organization. And how great it would be if we had actual, for example, museum people on museum boards that maybe have transitioned on to a different field. Or maybe they're looking to skill build and they can look at another nonprofit and be on the board there and provide that valuable insight that is so needed.
Right.
Just in thinking
Absolutely.
about that.
Yeah.
And so in that same vein, I just think I know you've been touching on this a little bit, and I have my own personal experience of having volunteers come in that are looking to skill build, and I would often give them a project. So that's often where I direct my folks if they're going to reach out to a place, start with a project. But the problem is, and I want this to get into our next topic, is they're there to skill build. Sometimes it's between roles, right? They left a job and are looking for something to add to their resume in the meantime, which is great. I'm happy to support. And part of that, comes through I think the conversation of expectations.
Yes.
But then they get the job and they disappear.
Disappear. The ghosting.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that is
Yeah.
rough as someone at a small organization. And I experienced this a few times. And it's on one hand, I understand because they were using it was mutual use, I guess, but also
Yeah.
it's like devastating to the organization that this project never got finished. And they just left us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And yeah, 100%. And that again, if you're the volunteer, don't ghost. Please be upfront. Please be honest, because we're all people. And I think as people, we just want to know and understand, so if you do get a job, we can celebrate with you and say, you know what? That's awesome. We really congratulate you. And so the thing you can do is if you do need to exit the volunteer role and it just doesn't fit into your next life at the moment, then leave well, because again, that's going to be remembered too. And you might want to come back to that nonprofit at some point. And would they be a reference again? Not if you ghost them.
Mhm.
And so you can leave well and say, okay, this is where the project is. This is, you can give a summary, give hints, tips, job aids, create things for the next volunteer or to help that transition, meet with the next volunteer, like be responsible, and actually think about like if you were in that role, how would you want to be left? Thinking about it reversed. And I just think, I don't know, this goes into RSVPing for parties. Kind of silly, but my husband and we host a once a year kind of party that we do at our house. And it's amazing. One year we had the same amount of maybes as we did as yeses. So I thought, so do I need to plan for 50 people or 100 people? Like, I don't know. So as a host, it's really hard, Or the people that said yes, then they don't show up and they have all this food. So it's just thinking about like if you were hosting the party, if you were the person that was in charge of this project and the person ghosted you, how would you feel? And I think people don't think about the reversal. They just are in their own head. It's too easy in today's world to be all about me. It's all about me. And I'm not even going to care about what anybody else thinks. And oh, it shouldn't matter. It's just volunteer time, quote, quote just. And then they don't realize the effect that you're having. And that's the responsibility of the nonprofit to help emphasize that. But people have to be also willing to hear that too, that if you leave or you don't show up for a shift, like you're leaving somebody in the lurch and this isn't going to happen. And now that, kid or that pet or that, whatever it is, isn't going to happen or isn't going to or you're putting more stress on the rest of everybody else. So it's a really important point. Like if you do need to leave a role or when you're ready to leave a volunteer role, make sure that you're communicating that. Why do you need to leave? Can you give them 2 weeks notice or can you give, not that you have to, but can you give them some kind of notice and opportunity to wrap up a meeting with, this is where things are and all those things. I think that's just so important in today's culture that's being lost.
It's almost like thinking about it like a job. I mean, it is a job,
Right.
right? But I think, yeah,
Right.
there's still that discrepancy of like, they'll find someone else, that's a volunteer role, all that mindset. And I think shifting it a little bit more to like, yes, we still have to take it seriously like it is a paid job.
Yeah.
Uh, and having those wrap up meetings, like that's so important for the
Yeah.
place.
It's a reflection on yourself. And so to think about how you want others to think about you. And I don't know the audience of this podcast, Allie and I are both in the Delaware area and I know, it's a small world, especially museums, especially any kind of niche.
Small.
Your people will learn about you in some way, shape, or form. And so what do you want to be leading ahead of you? What are you leaving behind or in front of you as you're going? What is your reputation going to be?
And then kind of taking that and going into more, how do you make the most of your volunteer time? So a lot of times we do work and we don't get pictures of things, or maybe we need a little bit to boost up being included in stuff, having people give feedback or any of those sort of advocacy, visibility, self-promotion type things that you can get
Mhm.
out of volunteer work. So can you share
Mhm.
some ways that
Yeah.
the organization can do it, but also how you can kind of seek them out too?
Yeah, I agree. And it's asking for that feedback, in a volunteer role. Go to the person that this is the staff or the lead volunteer and say, how can I do this better? Am I doing all right? Like what's good? What are my highlights? What can I change? I think it's a learning opportunity and to seek that out is really important. I think that's a great point, Allie, to that. and to really ask and to make that opportunity such that you are gaining as much out of it as you can, as well as giving all you can to the nonprofit into that role. And it's just going to multiply the goodness for you and for them by doing it the best way that you can. So I think that's really important. And social media, like I'm thinking too, like social media, like helping, you're going to help that nonprofit by posting things that you're doing because now you're raising awareness. And so it's also showing that you're doing something else on the side, like, hey, I'm volunteering with the, whatever group, and this is what we're accomplishing. And I just love learning, blah, 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 while I'm volunteering or whatever. So all of those things on social media can help yourself as well as the not for profit too.
Noting how many hours you're volunteering as well, that can be super significant. And then on the reverse, like what are some ways that, like practical ways that nonprofits can highlight the people that are
Mm.
helping them out, that you might be get wrapped up as part of that maybe you could advocate for, or to know to look for, like
Yeah, that's
newsletters and
great.
things.
What I like to do on any volunteer application is to include a question that says, how do you like to be appreciated? And I base that on the book, The Five Love Languages by
Hmm,
Chapman and White, I believe.
love that.
And so, and they have one that's for in the workplace. So the five languages in the workplace. And so, are you a person that likes time? So do you want a staff or another lead volunteer to spend time with you and chit chat? Is that important to you? Or is it that you like the mug or the shirt or the gift, the thing? Or do you like a certificate to put on the wall? Do so I actually have that question so that then as a nonprofit, when we're ready to promote volunteers on social media, I already know my top 5 volunteers that like to be out on social media because that's how they want to be appreciated. I go to them first. Now I'm appreciating them in the way that they like to be appreciated. And it's going out to the public and we can show volunteer opportunities. So that way I'm not going to volunteers that are like, oh no, never, no, 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 no social, like no photos, and so, it's, and because there are some people that don't like that and that's fair enough, so it just helps make sure that you're looking at the volunteers and appreciating them how they want to be appreciated. And it helps you though promote your volunteers.
Any I know we're almost at time, so I kind of want to leave people with some good advice, some good tips. Is there overall one or two kind of tips, tricks, advice that you want to leave our listeners with that may be considering or really want to consider volunteering as professional development or other reasons why they might want to do it?
Yeah, volunteerism is going to be like what we just talked about, skill set, growth. But in today's world, I feel like mental health is such a thing, and it really is such. But mental health, as far as well-being, like physical health, emotional health, spiritual health, like all those things, like mental health is part of it. And by volunteering, whether it's for skill set growth or not, it's going to help you emotionally. So if you're like in a job right now that you're like, nah, whatever, you know, I'm going to stay, I'm going to go, I don't know. But by volunteering somewhere, it can really help your mental state because anytime we give away something, whether it's a thing, our time, our being, whatever, we feel better. The dopamine kicks in. And so I think that in today's world, volunteering can really help us grow together as a community, as people, and just, build our relationships better together so that we don't see everything that's dividing everybody, but we start seeing things that are weaving us together. And I think that's just so key to do that. And then, but it is like the whole thing we talked about, if you are thinking about a career change into, out of, whatever, up, down, over, whatever it is, because it can be all sorts of directions, volunteering can be really helpful for that too. Either the actual skill set or that, again, it could turn into your stable thing that you start doing that becomes your consistent thing that, like, you know what, every Saturday morning I have free and I'm not doing job hunts and I'm not doing this. And that's going to be my like mental space where I can just, oh, this is great. It feels good. That's my happy place.
Mhm.
Amazing advice. Last question. Reverse it. So, what is one word of advice that you would give to nonprofits and museums offering these opportunities that maybe they should consider? Um, with people looking for professional development skills or just overall.
Right, right. Sure. Hey, why not? I'm going to put it out there, right? That's what I want to do. I want to help nonprofits do this well. But things that they can do is start thinking about one who is in charge of your volunteers. Do they have the right skill set to be in charge of volunteers? Because if you've just thrown it at them and they may or may not have the skill set. So make sure that they do give them training, give them mentors, give them a consultant, give them whatever it is that they need. And make sure the nonprofit itself is willing to start changing their viewpoint on volunteers. Volunteers are a strategy. To me, it's a strategy of implementing your mission. Volunteers aren't a program. You know, a program is like an education program. It comes, it goes, you can change it. But volunteers are a strategy to me in making nonprofits really flourish and to really increase that return on investment and the mission and the impact that happens in our community. So I really challenge nonprofits to think about volunteers as strategy, not a program. And they're people. It's people.
Yeah. And I think too, going off of that, we have such a issue, I know, especially in museums, with providing opportunities for professional development or even entry level positions. And I know it's unpaid. So acknowledging that, yes, like that is part of the difficulty. Some people might not have access, but certainly being more thoughtful about what opportunities they can provide can help solve some of these issues that are rampant in the field, that, you know, people, not everyone can pursue a degree or get a certificate or whatever it is. I think that's really important to mention.
Yeah. And to your point, volunteers should never replace staff and should never be those folks that are like filling in, like, oh, we don't have enough money, so volunteers can fill in. Not the right answer. There's an FSLA, there's all those things legally, like volunteers can't replace paid staff, and nor should they. Volunteers help increase that capacity. They increase the ability to do things. They increase, and volunteers are not free. I will always say that volunteers are not free and volunteers need investment. The fundraising group, to anybody who's fundraising, please fundraise for volunteer engagement, because there needs to be investment into the person that's leading the volunteers, into the volunteers themselves, making sure that they have all the equipment they need, the training they need, the risk management they need. There's just so many things. Volunteers are not free. And I think there's that misconception as well in the field that like, it's free labor. It is not. And the person that's leading the volunteers, it needs a little bit of skill set from practically every profession that's out there. So it's the widest reaching, I think, broadest kind of role that you need a wide skill set, and yet you need to do them all really well. And you're expected to deal with people that have every kind of different disposition and personality. And it's, to me, one of the most challenging roles that people just don't understand until they've tried to do it. And then they go, oh, so yeah.
Amazing points. And thank you for making those, especially about it not just being free labor. I think that's very important for people to hear.
Yes.
And to just give a really quick personal story to go off of that, to like show real world, right? As I was leaving my full-time museum position, I was part of the conversations, which I was fine with, of like, what's next, right? So, and we realized out of that one of the biggest pieces that we needed in our organization, we had about 80 some volunteers for a small museum with a staff of like 2 to 3.
That's great. Wow.
Amazing. So they were really making things run. We had an amazing volunteer corps. And had a conversation like, who do we hire next? And I really advocated and pushed for, we need a volunteer manager that is paid and full-time. Initially wanted a part-time. I was like, no, this person needs to be full-time for the level that we are engaging with our volunteers and the care that I was like, I am not able to give them because I am stretched so thin, because I am doing other roles. And just anyway, advocating that we need that. And I think it's really helped. The person that we have in that role now is amazing and brilliant. And yes, has to do all the things. We have volunteers working on the railroad and with antique cars, and then also, the other day to day, and she gets out there and gets in the dirt and helps them out. So just advocating in a real world way that is very needed and necessary. Any final thoughts, Elin, before we let Angela share just a little bit more about what you do, where to find you, about your business, things like that?
No, love to hear from you, Angela. Go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you both. So thank you so much for having me. And, Ellie and I this is the second time that I've worked with Ellie but prior. So thank you both. This is so exciting. So you can catch me on pretty much any social media. My website, Angela Williamson, CVA. .com, and I'm on Facebook and TikTok and YouTube. LinkedIn is where I am mostly on, but I am expanding into those other social media realms as well. And so I will be adding more to those. And so I'm really excited and I love hearing from people. I really challenge you to find me on LinkedIn and message me. I love messaging people and I love hearing from people. And I think that going back to our quick conversation about imposter, when I was first getting into the volunteer field, I was like, oh my gosh, that person, like they're way up there and they would never talk to me. And, why would they talk to me? And because I'm just this new person. And I don't know why I had that. And so if you feel like that, we're all people and human and I am authentic and this is who I am. I don't change. Ask Allie. I think I'm pretty much the same as probably when you met me, like how many years ago. So this is just who I am. And I don't really, that's who I am. So I would love to hear from you on LinkedIn and message me or email or catch me on my website. You can connect with me that way too. So definitely love to hear from you.
Angela's really great to follow on LinkedIn, especially if you're interested in more general like volunteer tips and tricks, but also other opportunities. She's always posting workshops and things that are going on, of course, things that she's involved with. Yeah, and just one final thing I want you to share, Angela, is what, if an organization wants to hire you or have you help volunteer engagement, volunteer structuring, things like that, just give like a real quick, like what you can help with.
There's so many different ways, but what I look at first is evaluation. We have a conversation first. Where are you? What are you looking for? Strengths, weaknesses. What is it that you're dreaming of? And then I like to customize. And so I don't have like a quote blanket program. I definitely have phases and steps in an organized system way. But I will then help you build the same thing, systems and processes that are people friendly, because there can be processes and systems that are not people friendly. So we want to make sure that things are people friendly. And so I will come in and there's tools that I have that I am a service enterprise licensed provider. And so there's a very in-depth assessment tool that we can use if you want to go that deep. There's even a service enterprise certification if an organization wants to go really deep and really go into this organizationally, or we can do smaller projects, so it really kind of depends on the organization and what they need. And that's the beauty of consulting, is that then I can work with you individually and be creative in the way that you need to have the right solutions. And that's how I like to work.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hopefully we've inspired some people on
you.
both sides. And
Yes.
I think the overall takeaway that I hope you all got is that volunteerism can be a powerful professional development tool when done intentionally and respectfully. So until next time, dear listeners, we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Curate Your Career. We hope today's episode gave you some ideas, encouragement, or at least a little bit of sanity for your museum career journey.
If you love what you heard, the best way to support us is to subscribe, leave a review, or share this episode with a fellow museum professional who might need it.
And don't forget, you can connect with us, send questions, or share your story at curateyourcareerpod@gmail.com or find us on Instagram at Curate Your Career Podcast. Don't forget to fill out our mailbag form and share your questions that might be featured on a future episode.
All right, now go take one small action toward the career you actually want. Don't just survive your museum job, curate it, one step at a time.